Okay, in this last video, what we're going to do is we're going to create a ball that comes in and it's going to have a few bounces. So we're going to basically combine everything that we did in the second ball, right? Add the ease in, ease out, add the squash and stretch, but this time we're going to do it across a few bounces and then it will roll to a stop. So again, we're going to need to create a new layer. I'm going to come over to my library. I'm going to drag a ball in. Okay, I'm going to put the ball over here. Okay, so somewhere in this area. It doesn't have to be perfectly the same, but somewhere in this area. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is hit, again, come down to the end and hit F6. So I've created a keyframe at the very end. Oh, actually, you know what? In this case, so once I've got the ball on my timeline, what I'm going to do is I actually need to draw a guide. I need to kind of draw something that's going to follow, that the ball can follow. So what I'm going to do is if I right-click on Layer 3, I actually have an option to add what's called a classic motion guide. So if I do that, I have the ball on my layer and then it added a guide layer on top of that. So what I'm going to do is on this layer, I'm basically going to take the pen tool. You can use other tools, you just need basically a line. I'm going to use the pen tool because I can get a little more precise. So I'm going to click on about where the ball is while I'm on this guide layer. Okay, and I'm going to click and drag as if the ball is coming in. You can kind of see it's going to come down, hit the ground. Okay, so I click and drag so that I have a little bit of an arc to it. Now I need it to go back up, and so in order to do that I have to click back on the point that I just created so that the curve doesn't come down, so it basically makes it a straight again, a straight edge. So then I'm going to come right here and I'm going to do something like this. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, click on that point again, so the ball is going to come down, bounce up. Then I'm going to come over here, I'm going to create another fairly small one, click, maybe one more really small one, click, and then it will roll over to here, maybe. Okay, I'm going to grab that and bring that down just a little bit. So there is my guide layer, right? So now what I'm going to do is on this layer, okay, because now I have something, I have my guide created, and what's really nice is that if you come up here, let's see, is it under view, snapping? So I'm going to make sure that snap to guides is on. I turned it off earlier, but I'm going to turn it back on because I need to be able to make sure that this ball snaps to my guide. Okay, so I'm going to turn on the other snapping options as well, snap align and snap to objects. Okay, so now notice that it snaps right to that line there. Okay. So I want to make sure that that's the case, that little circle that snaps to the line, because that's how I'm going to make sure that it follows my path. If I were to try and animate this not attached to the guide, it won't follow the guide. So this is what I'm going to do. So I snap it to it. I'm going to come down to a certain point, okay, and then on this layer, so this ball is going to come in probably a little bit faster. I'm going to come down, I'm going to hit F6, create a new keyframe so I can move my ball down to this bottom point. Okay, and so this lets me know I need to actually move the entire guide up a little bit so that when it hits the bottom it's not going off the screen, right? So drag that up a little bit. Actually, I probably need to take my guide back down just a couple of frames because I need to account for the squash. So anyways, I'm going to drag it down to the very bottom of that and I'll do a squash there. So I'm going to create another keyframe and another keyframe, right? The 3 keyframes just like we did here. So I'm going to have a hit and then I'm going to have a squash and then it's going to come back up. And then maybe at this point it's going to get to, I'm going to hit F6 again and that's when it's going to be up at the top. And then I'm going to come back down. So maybe right here. I'm going to go over one actually. So I'm going to hit F6. I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to do the same thing I did before. F6, F6. So I've got the 3 keyframes. Then I'm going to come over a few more keyframes, hit F6, move this up to the top, come over a couple keyframes, hit F6 again, drag it down, F6, F6. So I've got to have a little bit of the squish again. And then maybe I'm only going a couple frames there, and I'm going to bring it back up to the top. And then over probably just 1 frame, and it's going to come down, and then it will finish all the way at the end. Okay, so now I need to add in my tweens. So again, if you kind of followed along with this, I'm basically creating a keyframe just like I did on this particular layer. But I'm creating a keyframe every time I get to the bottom or the top of something. So I'm at the top, then I create one for the bottom, then I have to create one for the squash, and then the stretch. Okay, and then I go to the top again, and it comes back down to the bottom. Then the next frame is the squash, the next frame is the stretch. Then I'm going to go back up to the top, and then the bottom, and then the squash, and the stretch, and then the top, and then the bottom, and at this point it's not going to be squashing or stretching because it's really just going to roll to the end here, right? Okay, so now we need to add in our tweens. So we're going to create a classic tween here, create a classic tween here. I'm just going to right click in between my the areas where I'm going to have the motion taking place. So I need one here. So anytime I have a little bit of a gap, creating a tween. So now if I were to watch this, okay, again, obviously it's a little too static, but it's looking a little bit better. So now we need to click in between. We need to add our ease in and ease out. So if we come to our properties here, I'm going to ease in. On this one, I'm going to ease out. This one I'm going to ease in. Right? So again, if I watch this, boom, boom, boom. Okay, so I have to do a little bit more because it feels a little awkward right there, right? So on this one, because we're at the bottom, okay, we're going to do an ease out. And then we have another ease in. And then another ease out. And then this one is going to be also an ease out, where it basically comes to a stop. Okay, I think, yeah, we need to do an ease out. So now if I play that through, it's a little better, but obviously we don't have the squash and stretch. It makes it look a little awkward. So now we're going to come down to the bottom. Remember that I'm going to go to this middle frame. I'm going to hit Q. I'm going to do just a little bit of a squash. All right. And then I come back to this one where it's going to be just a little bit of a stretch. And I'm going to zoom in here just so I can kind of move it up further along there. So we squash, stretch, right? Comes down. Okay, I probably need to move this. I probably need to move my guide up just a tiny bit so we can get this right on there. So something about like that. Okay, so then it comes back up to the top. I come back down again on this middle one. I need to do a little bit of a squash. Okay. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a little bit of a stretch as I kind of start to move it along. Okay, we do the same thing, a tiny bit of a squash, like hardly anything on that. Okay, and then, oh, I need my stretch. So I'm just working with the tiny little bits, so let me come back. up here. Let's play this through. Okay, and that's not bad. Now I could make this a little bit better if I tried to, if I tried to make sure that my timing was perfect and all that. But for our purposes, this is going to be perfect. So if I wanted to, I could also add in a rotation. It's not going to make any sense to do that with this particular ball, but I want you to know how you do it. Again, you're going to click in between the frames. You're going to click up here, and you would actually use the rotation point. So I need to click on the ball. I thought, why is it not letting me? I think I have to go to the keyframe. I think that's what it is. Go to the keyframe, and then I can rotate it. Well, this is a complete circle, and there's nothing in there that would make it even look like it's rotating. So I'm not going to do that in this particular case. But adding a rotation would also help. And if you want to know how to do that, I'll create a quick separate video for that. So now that we have this all set up, we have one problem. The guide is visible. Well, we don't want to be able to see the guide. So all you have to do is just click this little button or this little dot right here underneath the eye, and it will hide the guide layer. The guide's still there, but it hides it for us. So now if I play this through, okay, and bring this back over here, okay, you can see the ball bounces through. Okay, and again, it's not perfect, but it looks fairly realistic compared to this first one, and even compared to this one that just bounces up and down because we've added in some of the gravity. It doesn't bounce quite as high the second time and that sort of thing. So hopefully that was helpful in walking you through the last process of the ball. So what you will do now is basically go to File, Save As, if you haven't already, and you should have your last name, okay, and your first name, and then bouncing ball, and save it as a Flash document, and then you're going to go ahead and turn that in on Canvas.